Now today we're going to cover quite a large section. We're actually planning to cover the whole of the six trumpets in today's class, and that's covering quite a lot of history. And so we're going to launch into it. It's going to be very quick. We're going to speed through it. So you're ready we're going for a rocket ride through history, through the period of the six trumpets. So I'm just going to give you a warning, just so it's nice to know how many slides the speaker has, and there's 49 slides. So here we go. All right. So just a quick recap of what we have covered so far. In the book of Revelation, you have 7 seals. And then when you get to the 7th seal, you have the 7 trumpets here. And then when you get to the 7th trumpet, you have the 7 vials. And then when you get to the 7th vial, you have the 7 thunders. And in our last class, we covered the first 6 seals, or series of classes. We covered the first 6 seals, which took us to the time of Constantine here, AD 324. And we're now going to open the 7th seal today. And when we open the 7th seal, it's going to reveal 7 trumpets. And we're going to look at the first 6 of those trumpets. So we're going to cover a period of history from the time of Constantine in AD 324 to about the year 1700 or so. All right, so long period in history there. So let's have a look. We're going to examine the first 4 trumpets. So that here we go. Here's a little bit of an overview of the 6 trumpets there. Firstly, we're going to look at the first 4. So I'm just going to ask for a volunteer reader. I'm going to volunteer someone. Let me see who's listening in. Actually, John, I'm going to volunteer you. Okay, so I'm going to get you to unmute and then read for me Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 to 2.
When he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets.
Okay, very good. Thanks, John. So what we read here is the 7th seal is opened up. And I don't know if you remember anything about the 6th seal. When the 6th seal was opened, there was lots of noise. There was a great earthquake. The sun went black. The moon became like blood. The stars of heaven come crashing to the earth. The sky gets rolled up, and every mountain and island gets moved. There's men all over the earth running for their lives and hiding in rocks, etc. There was loud noise everywhere. But when the 7th seal is open, it's quiet. And when John's seeing this vision, this all this upheaval, suddenly there's quiet for about the space of half an hour. And so this is reflecting the time period of when Constantine finally, the revolution in Rome is over. Constantine has defeated all his enemies, and there was peace and quiet in the Roman Empire. And that lasted until his death in 337 AD. So we're looking at from 324 to 337 AD, a period of about 14 years, which in biblical terms is about half an hour. I'm not going to go into that time period now. That would be the subject of another class. But Gibbon, when I refer to Gibbon, I'm referring to Edward Gibbon, who's a historian, and he wrote a book called The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. So when I talk about this guy named Gibbon, I'm talking about a secular, in other words, a non-religious history writer who's got no idea about the book of Revelation. And this is what he said. He said the general peace which he maintained during the last 14 years of his reign. He's talking about about Constantine. And so in that time period here, so in this time period, where, if you can see my mouse here, 14 years, Constantine moved his capital from the city of Rome. He moved it to the east, to the city of Byzantium. And that is, he renamed that city to Constantinople. He named it after himself. And that's, so Constantinople, where that is, that's where Turkey is, sorry, that's where Istanbul is today. And so when if you can just picture that bit of geography, I'm going to show you a map in a moment, but this Constantinople becomes really, really important when it comes to understanding sections of the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. So we're going to be talking a lot about Rome and Constantinople today. Now during this quiet time, just while there's this peace in the Roman heavens, if you like, these trumpets, these 7 trumpets are being handed out to 7 angels. So the trumpets had not begun to sound. And I don't know if you've had any experience with trumpets, but when a trumpet sounds, I can tell you now, there is definitely no peace. You know, I feel sorry for parents whose child wants to learn the trumpet. You know, we were very thankful that our children want to learn the guitar or the piano. And the last thing you want is your child wanting to learn one of 2 instruments. That is either the drums or the trumpet. So let's have just a glance at in chapter 8. If you look at verses 3 to 6 there, the trumpets are handed over to these angels, and the angels are going to make some noise. They're going to grab what is symbolized as the prayers of the saints, and they're going to cast this, if you like, coals of fire, these hot coals onto the earth. Now the earth there, if you can see there, when you see the word earth in the book of Revelation, you see it in verse 5. It says the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. Whenever you see that word earth, you think of the Roman Empire, because the earth in the book of Revelation is representing the Roman earth, the Roman Empire. And I think we looked at that in one of our previous classes. And so because whilst Christianity was being promoted by this emperor Constantine, he was the Christian champion, wasn't he? But it was false Christianity. Our brothers and sisters were suffering persecution no longer at the hands of pagans, but by the hands of Christian persecutors. And now the prayers of the true saints are being heard, and God is going to act. And so the silence that is being experienced is now interrupted. And so we have we have in verse 5 these voices and thunderings and lightnings, and then in verse 6 the angel trumpeters are about to sound. And this is reflective of the period here. So on the left of this little graph or timeline is Constantine's reign, and then he died in 337. And after that, his 3 sons, Constantine the second, these are very original names you'll see, Constantine the second, Constans and Constantius, right, were reigned after him. But and each of his 3 sons were given a third of the empire, or it was divided into 3 parts. But there was trouble between these 3 brothers, and there was unrest in the empire. And I guess that's what's represented by the voices and thunderings and lightning. And then there was an earthquake you'll see here in verse 5. Now, just note there that this earthquake is not one of the 3 major earthquakes. It's a small earthquake, Because when Julian, this guy Julian, is Constantine's nephew, when he took over the rulership of the empire, he was actually anti-Christian, and for 2 years he actually he turned the empire back into a pagan empire again. And if you like, it was a small earthquake, small because it only lasted 2 years, and then Christianity was reinstated. This reign of Julian is very significant, actually, because it was the last time that the Roman Empire is united under one single emperor. From now on, it's going to be divided into east and west, and hence you have the two legs of Nebuchadnezzar's image, the two iron legs of the Roman Empire. And now the trumpeters are about to sound, and we're going to see them wound the different parts of the Roman Empire. And so if you read Revelation 8 and 9, you're going to see this word third. I just want you to, it may be worth highlighting it here. Just so in verse 7, you'll see that a third of the trees were burnt up in the first trumpet. In the second trumpet, there's a third of the sea became blood. Verse 10, a third of the rivers it fell. And then verse 11, a third of the waters became wormwood. And it goes on about a third. And you read in chapter 9 as well. You'll read it in, for example, chapter 9, verse 15, a third of mankind was killed. And so you have this word third. It's worth noting that, because what God was going to do is he was going to divide the judgments into they're going to affect 3 different parts of the empire. Okay, and so this is just to show you on a bigger map here. The first 4 trumpets are going to affect the Latin West, where Rome is the capital. Can you see me moving my mouse there? Just a little nod, yes. So that's the first 4 trumpets are going to deal with that part of the empire. That's the Latin West. That's where the papacy has its greatest influence. The 5th trumpet is going to deal with the Hellenized East. Now that's if you like, the Middle East and North Africa that was influenced by the Greeks. It's the Hellens, right? Influenced by the Greeks. It was part of the Roman Empire, but it was governed by the Roman Empire. But I guess it wasn't part of the empire proper. It was, but it was. It was more of an area that was influenced by the Greeks. Whereas this part here, with the eastern part of the Roman Empire, of which, remember, we talked about that city, Constantinople. Well, that's the part of the empire that's going to be dealt with in the 6th trumpet. This part here. All right. So first 4 trumpets. The Latin West, the 5th trumpet, the Hellenized East, and the 6th trumpet, the Hellenic East here. You got that? Just a bit of an overview there. So there it is. And there's highlighted there the different parts where it talks about the third part, the third part, the third part, the third part. Certainly worth highlighting there. And again, I guess it's a good slide because it shows the first 4 trumpets dealing with the Latin West, the 5th trumpet, the Hellenized East, or North Africa and Palestine, and then the 6th trumpet dealing with the Hellenic East, or Constantinople. Now, I've found that this was a particularly useful map that I found on the internet, and it shows the different parts of the Roman Empire quite well. I just want you to ignore this part here, where it talks about the Arab Caliphate, because the Arab Caliphate didn't come up till about the year 630 odd. So just ignore that bit for now. But certainly here at the, after the time of Constantine, this is what we have. We have the Western Roman Empire with its center in Rome, and what we call the Byzantine Empire, which is the eastern part of the Roman Empire. which had its capital in Constantinople. Just very easy map here. And then you may have heard of this term, barbarians. Now, we tend to associate that word barbarians with savage, uncivilized people. And hence we use the word barbaric when someone does some horrendous act. But when we talk about barbarians with reference to the Roman Empire, a barbarian was just someone who was simply a foreigner, because it was someone who was seen as uncivilized from a Roman perspective. So if you were a Roman living in the Roman Empire, you had these certain laws and, rules and, a government and so forth. You lived in a civilized society. These tribes out there, you saw them as foreigners, as barbarians, but they were Germanic tribes. And barbarians didn't mean that you were a barbaric people. For example, if on Malta, if you have a King James version, I think it's in the margin or something, you'll find that it's the word barbarians used to describe the people of Malta. And perhaps the most savage that the Maltese could do is probably will catapult pastizzis to you or something like that. But they weren't barbaric people. And same with the Germanic tribes. These Germanic tribes, these people had families. They cared for their young. They were not savages. But what it is these people were going to get pressure now from another barbaric people, and these were barbaric people. These were a savage fighting force called the Huns. Okay, so the Huns, who came out of this part here, what we know as southern Russia or Kazakhstan, these were nomadic. Mongol. They were fierce Mongolian people who came and invaded Europe, and they spent their lives on horses. And these men were known to eat on horses. They were known to sleep on horses. They were known to brush their teeth on horses. Actually, I don't think they had teeth. They were fierce in battle. They were bearded dwarfs who just cut down everything in their path. These were savage, uncivilized people. And because the Huns were pressing westward, the Germanic tribes who were in this area were being pushed in towards the Roman Empire. So tribes we call like the Goths, but we hear of these tribes like the Goths, the Vandals, and so forth. These were Germanic tribes who were being pushed into the Roman Empire and onto the borders of the empire. Now, if you can see this river, I've got the mouse over it here. That's called the Danube River, and that was the border of the Roman Empire. And what we had, you have these Germanic tribes, these Goths, being pushed against the border. So you got the Romans stopping them one way, and you got the Huns pushing them the other way. And so what happened was the Germanic tribes, like the Goths, were trying to. They pleaded to the Roman Emperor, said, "Can you please let us in the empire? Where we need some land, we need some food, the Romans did let them in eventually, but they treated them very badly. In fact, the Romans, because the Goths were so starving, they traded their children as slaves to the Romans, and if you like, the pressure from the Huns and the cruelty of the Romans created the situation that would eventually destroy the Western Roman Empire. This was the angels preparing themselves to sound. And so we have the first four wind trumpets. We call them wind trumpets because in the chapter before, in Revelation 7 verse 1, John sees these four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds, just holding them back from blowing before the first four trumpets are blown. the wind trumpets. I just want you to remember that. The first four are wind trumpets. I found this map in Wikipedia, and, you know, again, it's a secular website here, and it's and I just found it's quite useful because it shows the invasions of the Roman Empire from the Germanic tribes coming from all different directions. And you're going to think, well, hang on, you said the Germanic tribes lived up here in the north. Well, how come now they're going to attack from the south? Well, we're going to see how the Vandals ended up in North Africa, of all places. But you can see that the winds, the four winds, are going to blow in all directions to destroy or to wound the Western Roman Empire. So when we're going to come to the first trumpet here, it's in Revelation 8, verse 7. John, if you're still handy there, I might get you to read that, please. Revelation 8, verse 7.
The first angel sounded, and a hail of fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up.
All right, thanks. So just very quickly here, the trees representing the people who stand up tall, the rulers, and the grass representing the common people. This first trumpet was going to affect the rulers and the people. And so it sounds quite vicious. And what this is going to be the invasion of the Western Roman Empire by this man named Alaric and his Gothic armies. And so what we have here is that, just a little bit of history here, is that the Romans, like I said, made this treaty that with the Goths. And, you know, and they're even many of the Goths were enlisted in the Roman army. And, you know, some of these Gothic soldiers, they made some really outstanding achievements for the Romans, but they were never properly recognized for it. And this guy named Alaric, he became the leader of the Goths. And because of, again, the injustices caused by the Romans, he turned against them. He turned against the empire. And his Visigoth army made multiple incursions, firstly, here in the eastern part of the empire. But then what he did was he turned against the west. And the Romans had this famous general named Stilicho, and he withstood Alaric on a number of occasions. But the Romans, because of various personality clashes, we could call it, they executed their great military leader, Stilicho, and Alaric was able to march down the Italian peninsula and besiege Rome itself. He held a siege in 408 AD and starved the city of Rome. And then the people ended up offering this huge tribute, this payment of 5,000 pounds of gold. It's just an incredible amount of money just to say, get out of here. But then two years later, he came back, and in 3 days, he sacked the city of Rome. And when we talk about sacking the city of Rome, that means many of its buildings and monuments were just burnt and pillaged by Alaric the Goth. And this was represented by this first trumpet of hail and fire. And here we have a slide there. You know, and even Gibbon records, he says, at the hour of midnight, the Salarian gate, that's the gate into Rome, was silently opened, and the inhabitants were awakened by the tremendous sound of the Gothic trumpet. This was the first trumpet in the book of Revelation. It was a Gothic trumpet. The Visigoths came and sacked Rome. And so the famous eternal city, you know, Rome, it was known as this impregnable city. This was the first time a foreign invader comes and burns and pillages the city. Now, strangely enough, it was not Alaric's aim to do this to Rome. He did not want to destroy the buildings. He did not want to burn the city. He actually regretted doing it after it was done. It was counterproductive to his cause. But Alaric himself admitted this. He said, "It is not of my own will that I do this." He said, "There is one who forces me on and will not let me rest, bidding me to spoil Rome." You think, wow. And, this guy, Alaric, he was a Christian. I mean, these Goths got converted to Christianity, not exactly the same as Catholics. They were Arian Christians, meaning they believed in one God, but they had a lot of other false beliefs. But nevertheless, he believed in God. He said, "I'm doing God's will here." And God was driving this man to bring about this judgment on the Western Roman Empire. And Alaric, he only died a short time later. The angels had finished with his services. And the Goths eventually settled down let me just go back to the map. The Goths eventually settled down in this part of the empire here, in the west, really western part. And they became what was called the Visigoths, or Western Goths. That's why they're called Visigoths, when later on they came and settled in this part of the empire. So that's the end of the first trumpet. And moving right along, just quickly, this one's really interesting as well. This is the second trumpet. Now, John, I'll get you to read the second trumpet. If you can read that in verses 8 and 9, please.
Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. And a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed.
All right. Thank you, John. And so we have the second trumpet, described as this great burning mountain cast into the sea. It's becoming, the sea becoming blood, destroying a third of the ships. This mountain, a mountain on fire, is symbolic of a destroying power. And in this case, the sea is giving us an indication of geographically of where this is going to be. It's got something to do with the Mediterranean. Now, what possibly happened in the Roman Empire that meets this description? Well, this second trumpet is referring to a man named Genseric, or Genseric, as he's often known, and the Germanic tribe called the Vandals. And this trumpet begins in 429 AD. Oops. And so what we have is, remember I said, how did the Vandals end up here in North Africa? Well, what happened was the Vandals were a Germanic tribe, and they too were under pressure from the Huns. So they came and eventually settled in here, in this part of Spain, over here. But what happened was there was this Roman governor down here in Africa. Now, North Africa was if you like, the breadbasket of Rome. It's what supplied the grain, a lot of the foodstuffs for the Roman Empire. So it was a very, very valuable part of the empire. And this Roman governor named Boniface, he was seen as a bit of a rebellion, and he was worried that he was going to get taken over by these other generals, these other Roman generals. So what he did, this Roman governor, he sent an invitation to the Vandals and said, "Look, would you like to come and help me defeat these other Roman generals?" And so Genseric said, "Yes, we'll do that, no problem." So they came in here, and what he ended up doing, Genseric and the Vandals ended up defeating the Romans here, absolutely obliterated the Romans, and he took over this part of the world. The Vandals then possessed this part of the kingdom and eventually settled in the city of Carthage. I don't know if you can see that there. Carthage is a really major seaport in the Mediterranean. It's the seaport which is going to transport all this food into the Roman Empire. And so at Carthage, what Genseric did, he built a large fleet of ships, and he gained control over all the Mediterranean waters. And Genseric became a pirate. And so what happened was Genseric one day decided we're going to go up and sack the city of Rome, and they did. And they actually the previous sacking of Rome by Alaric was like a Sunday school picnic compared to this one. Everything was just destroyed. Like buildings were just burnt. Place was just pillaged. There's everything, you know. Genseric, he tore apart temples, destroyed public buildings. He robbed private houses. He plundered the emperor's palace. They destroyed works of art, carried away anything that was valuable. And hence, this is where we today get the term Vandals. It actually comes from this Vandal tribe. Okay, it's true. It's that's where we get it from. Someone who performs destructive acts. This guy was a pirate, and he plundered the coasts of the Italian peninsula. He caused a lot of damage to the empire, and he terrorized the Mediterranean with his pirate ships. And I was going to say, in 461, the Roman emperor in the West, this new guy named Majorian, he thought, we've got to stop this. We can't let this keep happening. So what he did was he built a fleet of 300 ships, and he was preparing these ships in this port over here called Cartagena. And Cartagena, sorry, I said it wrong. And these were, you know, and what he did was he was amassing this army. He was bringing this huge army from here to Cartagena to launch an assault on Carthage. But Genseric found out about this, and what he did was he sent ships in here, and he burnt all those 300 ships and destroyed it. One hit, gone. All right? And they all sank. Now, 7 years later, in 468 AD, came what's called the Battle of Cape Bon. And what this was a joint military expedition of both the Western and the Eastern Roman emperors. They combined their forces against Genseric. And what they amassed was one of the largest amphibian operations in antiquity, perhaps the biggest one until the invasion of Normandy in World War II. This was massive. This was what they amassed was they built a fleet of 1,113 ships with over 50,000 personnel. Massive thing. And this fleet, sorry, I'll just go back to the map. This fleet came and made to shore near Carthage, in a place called Cape Bon. And Genseric thought, oh no, what have I done here? And he was looking down the barrel of defeat. And what he asked the Roman general, he said, look, just give me 5 days. 5 days, I'll work out a peace treaty, and then I'll be out of here. And the Roman general said, yeah, go for it. Yeah, no problem, you know, because they were a bit bold. They thought there's no chance that Genseric's going to get out of this one. But what Genseric did in that 5 days was he got his fleet of ships. He gathered all his ships, and what he did was he filled them with combustible material, and he propelled them. He said, all right, I hope the wind's going to be in my favor here. He propelled these ships and set them alight into this parking lot of ships, of these 1,113 ships, and half the ships got destroyed by fire. And it was a massacre. It was a bloodbath on the Mediterranean Sea. And what we have is the exact symbol of the second trumpet. We've got fire on the sea, the ships sinking on the sea, and it being filled with blood. Yeah, it's just I know that's a symbolic prophecy, but what a remarkable literal fulfillment of that prophecy. I'm going to move right on. I've got to go very quickly here. The third I will quote this. This is a quote from Gibbons, because what happened was, when with Genseric, you know, he was a pirate well into his, you know, old age, and when the when his sailors would say to Genseric, well, where are we sailing today, Genseric? And he would say this. He would say, leave the determination to the winds. They will transport us to the guilty coast, whose inhabitants have provoked the divine justice. Genseric too was a Christian. And he said, leave the determination to the winds, the wind trumpets. Yeah, and just a very, very interesting phrase there. All right, just very quickly. So the third trumpet, we're not going to read it there, but it talks about this meteor, this star burning through heaven. It's a meteor, a falling star, a star that lights up for a brief moment, and then it's gone, isn't it? You know, you say, look at that falling star. Oh, it's gone. You know, by the time the other person looks, it's gone. And that's what the reign of Attila the Hun was like. Remember, we talked about these savage Huns. Well, these savage Huns, they ravaged parts of the Roman Empire. In fact, they were so, you know, the Romans were so worried about these Huns that the Romans formed a coalition with their enemies, the Goths, the Visigoths, and the Franks, and they stopped the Huns from entering Gaul here, Gaul, like what we know as France. They teamed up together, the Romans, the Visigoths, and the Franks teamed up together to repel these Huns. And it was a bloodbath. There was 250,000 people died in that battle. Amazing. Like, these are 250,000 people we're talking about here. The Huns were angry. They wanted revenge. And so what they did was they came and they destroyed and they pillaged the cities of the Alpine areas. And hence the trumpet talks about this great star falling on the rivers and the springs of water. The place where in the Roman Empire, where the rivers run, it's the Alpine areas. Funnily enough, he marched down. He wanted to attack Rome itself. Strange enough, though, it was the Pope who actually stopped him. It was the Pope who met, the Pope in his regalia sort of met Attila sort of on the way, and Attila changed his mind. I don't get it, but he stopped attacking Rome. But again, Attila was gone. You know, after these battles, Attila died and the Hun Empire almost collapsed. I'm just going to leave that slide. I'm going to move on, right? There's some interesting detail there. Just going to move on to the fourth trumpet. Maybe, John, could you read verse 12, please?
Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened, and the third day did not shine, and likewise the night.
Okay, so what we have here is an eclipse. It's an eclipse of the Western Roman Empire. This is the year 476 AD is the official year that the Western Roman Empire collapsed. It was going to be eclipsed. Okay, that's the description of an eclipse there. And what happened was the Roman Empire just kept declining with these invasions of these barbarian nations. And this guy named Odoacer, who was a Goth, who was in the Roman army, but he became a military leader, and he eventually took over the Roman Empire. He deposed of the last Roman emperor, whose name was Romulus. And it's a really strange coincidence of history, isn't it? Because the first emperor of Rome, or the first, monarch or the king of Rome, was Romulus. And the last one was named Romulus as well. And so Odoacer, who's a foreigner, is going to now become the ruler in Rome. We've got a foreign ruler in Rome, and hence we have the eclipse of the Roman Empire. And what happened was this other guy named Theodoric. Theodoric was an Ostrogoth or an Eastern Goth. And what happened was this Theodoric was sent as a hostage to the Eastern Roman emperor named Zeno. And though he was a hostage, he was treated well. He was educated in Constantinople. He was sort of almost raised in the emperor's court. And he ended up becoming a military leader in the Eastern Roman Empire. And this Emperor Zeno, he didn't like Odoacer very much. And he ended up commissioning Theodoric to go and to defeat Odoacer. And what happened was there were a number of battles. Eventually, Theodoric and Odoacer came to this peace treaty. And in this city called Ravenna, which is up here to the north of Rome here, they had this peace treaty, and 10 days later they thought they'll have dinner together to celebrate this peace treaty. And all of a sudden, Theodoric gets his sword out, and he gets it, and he cleaves Odoacer. His sword goes through the collarbone all the way down to the hip. And you know what he said? He said, I knew this scoundrel didn't have a bone in his body. And Theodoric then becomes the Gothic king and firmly establishes what we call, in Bible terms, the Gothic head. Remember, this is the subject of another class, but those who know what I'm talking about here, the sixth head was wounded. What a graphic way to show that sixth head was wounded, but not unto death. Remember? Because the Gothic head, the Gothic rulership, was only going to last about 60 years because the sixth head was going to revive. But that's the story of another subject. And so the Western Empire was eclipsed. Eclipse implying that it's not going to be eclipsed forever, is it? It's going to become light again. We're going to have a revival of the Western Roman Empire, but in a different form. That's going to come in the form of what we call the beast of the sea and the beast of the earth. But that's going to come later on. That's the subject of another class. And so we have the first four trumpets eclipsing the Western Roman Empire. And just very quickly, we're going to talk about the fifth and the sixth trumpet. So remember, the first four trumpets were to eclipse the Latin West, with Rome included there. The fifth trumpet now is going to affect the Hellenized East, which is North Africa and the Middle East. And sorry, let me just see where I'm up to, because I've just sort of just skipped over that. Now, the last three trumpets, we're only going to talk about the fifth and sixth tonight, but the last three trumpets are called woe trumpets. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. It says in Revelation 8, verse 13. They're called woe trumpets. They're going to be worse than the first four because these are going to end up in the death of the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay, so this was going to happen. This was going to happen by not these Christian barbarians, but by a new religion called Islam. So the Eastern Empire is going to be attacked by this new force, never been seen before in the empire. The fifth trumpet will be the invasion of the empire by the Saracens. Now, the Saracens, if you want to think, are Muslim Arabs. They would swarm in large numbers over the Middle East and conquer the Middle East, North Africa, and they'd even eventually get into Spain. And it all started with this man named Muhammad. Now, you've probably heard of Muhammad before. Muhammad was born about 570 AD in this city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, or Arabia, I should say. And at the age of 40, Muhammad is reported to have received a visit from the angel Gabriel. And thus he allegedly had his first revelation from God. And in 613 AD, he began preaching this monotheistic God with all these, and talked about all these revelations that he had, and he gained a following in Mecca. But some years later, about 9 years later, Muhammad and his followers were rejected, persecuted by the people of Mecca, and he fled from Mecca to this other city called Medina to avoid persecution. And in Medina, Muhammad began gathering an army, and he won several battles. Now, by the time of Muhammad's death in 632 AD, most of this Arabian Peninsula had converted to this new religion of Islam. And after his death, Muhammad's friend, now the names are all familiar, listen to this, it's Muhammad's friend whose name is Abu Bakr, he became the first caliph. Now, what is a caliph? A caliph is going to become the Islamic ruler over Islamic controlled territory. So he's the ruler over the people, over the temporal affairs, plus the religious affairs as well. It's the caliph. And hence what we have in green is what we call the caliphate. It's the Islamic Empire. Now, do you remember, when we had ISIS and ISIL and, Islamic State, what they were trying to resurrect the caliphate that existed back in the 600s and the 700s. They were trying to resurrect that unsuccessfully, but they tried. And by the time, I was going to say, Muhammad's successors managed to conquer most of this area in green by the year 654 AD. And what we have here is the Hellenized third of the Roman Empire was dealt a huge blow. Now, how much time I have? I'm just going to throw a few symbols in here. You see here in Revelation 9, verse 2, it says that he opened the bottomless pit, he being the star fallen from heaven, verse 1. That's talking about Muhammad. He opened the bottomless pit. Now, what's the bottomless pit in Revelation? Well, the bottomless pit is talking about Europe, all right, the place where the harlot sits, because in Revelation 17, remember the harlot, the beast, it comes out of the bottomless pit. That's what it says, and so that's the dirgy waters of the peoples, nations, and tongues of Europe. But what in verse 2 is, it's not the bottomless pit that he has the key to, because the word for bottomless pit in verses 1 and 2 is different. I don't know if you've got it in your margin there, but where it says bottomless pit, there's an extra word added. It's not the word abyss or abusos, it's the word frua abusos. It means the shaft. It's the shaft or the pit that leads to the abyss. See, the abyss is Europe. The shaft that leads to the abyss is this part of the Middle East here. It's these nations that lead into the abyss. And I think this diagram shows it quite well. Right, what Muhammad was given to was he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit, right? Because he did not conquer Europe. The Saracens didn't conquer Europe. In fact, the Saracens were conquered. Like they got into Spain. They attempted to conquer all of Europe, but it was the Franks here in Gaul who saved the day. Otherwise, Europe would have been an Islamic nation today if it wasn't for the Franks. And so just moving right along, the symbol that's used here is the symbol of the locust. And the word for locust, the Hebrew word is arbe, which sounds very similar to the Hebrew word for Arab, the way the Hebrews would say Arab. And it uses the symbol of the locust. Now, locusts come swarming and devouring all this territory. And in history books, the Arabs are described as these swarms of people coming to conquer the land. I think I'm going to leave it there. I was going to talk about the heads like horses and the gold, you know, the gold referring to the turban, the golden turbans, the yellow turbans that the Saracens wore. But I'm going to leave that there, all right? I'll leave that there, but the time periods as well, because we're running out of time. But what was interesting, actually, this is interesting. What was interesting was the mission statement by this guy named the Caliph, the first Caliph, Abu Bakr. You know what he said? He said, destroy no palm trees, nor burn any fields of corn. Cut down no fruit trees. Don't do any mischief to cattle. So they weren't going to be like the Huns and sort of burn and pillage everything. Just only kill what you need to eat. But what you will find, you'll find another sort of people that belong to the synagogue of Satan who have shaven crowns. Be sure to cleave their skulls. This guy was anti-Christian. He wanted to destroy the Catholic system of Europe, or the Orthodox, you know, what was the Catholic system at that time in Europe. And so he, and that was his mission. And if you look at Revelation 9, verse 4, look what it says. I've got it on the screen there. They were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth, that's the people, or any green thing. It's totally contrary to a locust, isn't it? This is very uncharacteristic. Or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God in their foreheads, talking about the clergy. And their mission was to destroy this Trinitarian religious system that was there. And so a third of the system was locked away. I was going to read this quote from actually I will read it. It just says here, the empire lost one of the three great divisions of the empire, that namely in which neither Greek nor Roman civilizations had ever thoroughly taken root. In other words, the Hellenized third of the Roman Empire. That's from this historical geography book of Europe there. Just the last trumpet, just very quickly. The last trumpet, the sixth trumpet, is referring to the Turkish invasion of the Eastern Roman Empire. And so, whereas the fifth trumpet, if you want to highlight these words, in the fifth trumpet, there was torment in verse 5. In verse 6, there was the desire to die, but they didn't die. In verse 10, their power was to hurt men 5 months. But it doesn't talk about death, does it? Whereas you come to the sixth trumpet, in verse 18, you'll see by these three plagues, a third of mankind was killed. Verse 15, go back a couple of verses. It says, the four angels who had been prepared for the hour, day, month, and year were released to kill a third of mankind. This whilst the fifth trumpet was going to wound the Eastern Roman Empire, the sixth trumpet was going to kill it, and kill it for good. And so we have the four waves of the four angels which are going to be loosed in verse 14. Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And these were the Seljuks, the Mongols, the Timurids, and the Ottomans. I would have loved to have spent a bit of time talking about this because it's very, very interesting. But I'm just going to go straight over to the fall of Constantinople here. See, until the sixth trumpet, this city of Constantinople had managed to survive. You know, there was a time when, you know, that city fell to the west. It fell to other places, but it basically remained the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Now, by the time the Ottomans came, and in about the year, you know, sort of the 1400s, the only bits of the Eastern Roman Empire that were left were these in purple. Do you remember how big the Eastern Roman Empire was? Well, these are the only bits left in purple. So basically the city of Constantinople, this bit down here near Greece, but Constantinople had hardly anything left. They were sitting ducks against the Ottomans. The Ottomans had invaded they had conquered all of what's called Anatolia, which is what we know as Turkey today. They had invaded the Balkans, so this area of, like Albania, Bosnia, etc. That's why there's a lot of Muslims in the Balkans, because the Ottomans conquered that. And so Constantinople is being besieged. And in 1453, the Ottomans besieged the city of Constantinople. The siege lasted for 53 days. And it was eventually the walls were broken down. And how they did it was by the use of a cannon. This was just no ordinary cannon. This was the mother of all cannons. And it's just really interesting, the language of Revelation 9. Just have a look at these. Just look at the language here in verse 17. It says, "Thus I saw the horses in the vision, and those who sat on them had breastplates of fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow. And the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone. By these three plagues, a third of mankind was killed, by the fire, the smoke, and the brimstone which came out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents, having heads, and with them they do harm." And just imagine the Apostle John. He's looking at this vision. He has no idea what he's looking at here. He's seeing this represented here, and you see there he's seeing the symbol of a cannon about 1,200 years before they're even invented. And you think that is a perfect description. What John saw, what he's talked about, the power coming out of the fire, coming out of their mouths, and the power is in their tails. It's just, it's and the tails were like serpents, because they were, like the wick sort of thing. It was just a perfect description of the cannon. And the cannon was used to destroy the walls of Constantinople. And this is my last slide. This is now the Ottoman Empire. That was the Ottoman Empire in the year 1580, right? The height of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is described as the great river Euphrates. And it's like a flood, this flood of Ottomans, like the river Euphrates runs right through the Ottoman Empire and drains out into the Persian Gulf, right through here. And when the river was flooding, it was represented the Ottoman Empire at its height. Well, we now live in the period of the seventh trumpet and the sixth vial. And the sixth vial is the drying up of the river Euphrates. It's the drying up. And we still live in that period, in that sixth vial. We are waiting for the coming of Christ, because Christ comes at the end of the sixth vial. And it says the river Euphrates will be dried up. And since the 1800s, the river Euphrates has dried up, not literally, but symbolically. The power of the territory of the Ottoman Empire has shrunk to just be the area of Anatolia, or the area of Turkey today. See, look what it was before. All the way here, all Ottoman Empire. It's shrunk. In 2022, the Ottoman Empire is drying up. The river Euphrates is drying up. That drying up will be completed when Russia takes control of Constantinople. When the little horn of the goat stands in Constantinople, once again, the power of Russia will take that. Russia will become the king of the north when it occupies that part of the world. That hasn't happened yet. That will probably happen after Christ returns. And so that's where we leave our class today. And I'll just end with the words of Jesus, who says, "Blessed is he who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book." Thank you.